What's going on, Broncos country? Coming up on today's show, we're going to unpack Courtland Sutton's holdout as we are entering OTAs and then minicamp, and I'll tell you guys what it all means and where I'm at with it. Plus, we got some Week 1 scheduling rumors. The NFL schedule does come out tomorrow, Wednesday, at 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, so we'll talk about that towards the end of the show. But let's talk about Courtland Sutton holding out, because over the last few weeks, the Broncos have had some voluntary workouts at the facility. Not OTAs, just pumping iron at the facility, getting in shape, stuff like that. And Courtland Sutton was not present, and Sean and George Payton both spoke to the media and said, we've been in contact with Courtland. We're in a good place. He's in a good place. No alarm bells went off. But now that Bo Nix is in the mix, and you got a rookie quarterback, and your number one wide receiver is potentially holding out from off-season workouts, which are voluntary up until mandatory minicamp, which is June 11th through the 13th, you might start to have a little bit of a problem. Because my guess is Sean Payton wants to get the best out of Bo Nix as soon as possible, because he got ownership to sign off on moving on from Russell Wilson because he felt like he could improve at the quarterback position despite, the financial hurdles of Russell Wilson's contract. And if Bo Nix's number one guy isn't there to develop chemistry with him in OTAs, that may not be ideal for Bo Nix starting off on a hot note. So for me, concern does not really kick in until we reach mandatory minicamp. If Courtland Sutton is not there at OTAs, I'm not going to believe that that's going to be a major impact to Bo Nix's first game in the NFL. I just don't think there's going to be a moment in that first game for Bo Nix where he drops back and he's like, damn, I didn't realize Sutton was going to run that route instead of this route. If only we had that day or two together in May. No, we've got all of training camp and preseason for these two to get down a connection. But if Courtland Sutton does not show up to mandatory minicamp, well, he's going to pick up a lot of fines. And he's going to be sending a signal that he is very serious about this holdout. Now, he is seeking a new contract. I don't think it's a contract extension. I just think he wants more guaranteed money. He's got 2 years left on his deal. Only $2 million of the $13.1 million remaining is guaranteed. And now he did sign a 4-year, $60 million extension back in November of 2021. And I think you could say that the Broncos have been on the losing end for much of that contract extension, right? The 2 seasons following 2021, well, they just weren't Courtland Sutton's best years altogether. So, including 2021 up until 2023. So, 2021 and 2022, the guy had 4 touchdowns combined. Then you fast forward to last year, 2023, and he puts up 10 touchdowns. Which, by the way, if you look at Courtland Sutton's rankings amongst his peers, his contract for this upcoming season, $15.2 million, that ranks 15th among wide receivers. Touchdowns, he was tied for 4th last year. So you can see where Courtland Sutton goes, the math ain't mathin'. I'm 4th in touchdowns, but I'm 15th in paid by average salary. Not going to cut it. Now, the Broncos can come back with, yeah, that's nice, but you were also 44th in yards and tied for 57th in receptions. So, to be frankly honest with you guys, both sides have good points, right? From Courtland Sutton's standpoint is, I'm the number one guy. We moved on from so many leaders of this locker room. Justin Simmons, Russell Wilson, Kareem Jackson, Josie Jewell, Lloyd Cushenberry. A lot of guys that were starters for a long time on this team. I'm all of a sudden looking around like, I'm kind of the oldest guy in the room all of a sudden. And I want to be paid like a leader. I want to be paid like a team captain. And you're not showing me that you believe in me beyond the tune of $2 million, which does not bode well for him returning guaranteed next year in 2025, which ultimately I think that's what he wants out of the Broncos. He wants assurance that this is not his last year with Denver and they can move on from him scot-free after 2024. Whereas the Broncos look at it as, dude, we gave you a 4-year, $60 million extension. You still have 2 years left on that deal. Garrett Bowles is out there practicing right now. He's on the last year of his deal. He's got 0 guaranteed money, and he's not pitching a fit. So both sides have good points. I'll chime in with, we're not close to a trade, and I don't want to see any 2025 guaranteed money go towards Courtland Sutton. I like Sutton. I think he's a really important leader on this team. 10 touchdowns last year were awesome. There's no denying all that. But when you get up in the age column and you're not a wide receiver that separates all that well, and I think Sutton is kind of trending towards that direction, I don't know if that's a guy you want to put all your eggs in the 2025 basket. Now, I don't think we're close to a trade going down. I still think we are a good steps away from encroaching on, all right, let's talk about Courtland Sutton getting dealt. Right now, it's just voluntary workouts. Guys skip them all the time. People in the media, like myself included, can probably make too big of a deal out of these stories from time to time because it's the offseason. Things are dry, right? You're looking for stuff to talk about. Star player not showing up, boom, that's our video for the day. And I'm doing it right now, but the reality is I don't want to have you all leave this video panicked and alarmed that Denver's trading Sutton. Sutton has not asked to be traded. The Broncos don't want to trade Sutton. 1 + 1 = 2. I think we're going to be just fine. Now, before we get on to the next portion of today's show, which is all about the schedule release, I do want to remind everyone that Bo Nix is a part of this equation as well. And when you've got a rookie quarterback, maybe you bend the knee a little bit to the star wide receiver because the last thing the Broncos want to see happen is Courtland Sutton does get serious in his holdout. It ends up with a trade at the end of all this. And now Bo Nix doesn't have a guy with 10 touchdowns last year to throw to. And his top wideouts are a second-year guy in Marvin Mims, Josh Reynolds, who is a solid wide receiver 3, but I think that's his ceiling, Tim Patrick, who's missed the last 2 years, and then a plethora of former UDFAs and late day 3 draft picks. Now, I think little Jordan Humphrey was a UDFA. So all UDFAs in Jalen Virgil, Brandon Johnson, no offense to those guys, a rookie in Troy Franklin. It's really important to make sure Bo Nix is successful this year. And keeping Courtland Sutton is a good way to ensure that happens. So what's your concern level over Courtland Sutton's holdout? Scale it 1 to 10. 10 being you're freaking out, 1 being this is a non-story. I'm at like a 2.9, right? I think I'm close to a 3, but 3 is too big of a number for me. So 2.9 for me when it comes to Sutton holding out. Now, next up on the show, I do want to talk about the Week 1 rumors, as the NFL has their schedule released tomorrow, Wednesday, late afternoon, early evening. And we've already seen some of the games start to trickle out, which means we can kind of start piecing together who's where in Week 1, then who's available in Week 1, and maybe the Broncos have a primetime matchup. But before we get to all that good stuff, today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy. All you do at Prize Picks is select 2 to 6 players and then choose more or less on their projected stats. Now, one of my favorite things about Prize Picks is it's super easy to withdraw your winnings. A lot of times, places make it really impossible, and you got to jump through a lot of hurdles, and believe me, I have been there. But with Prize Picks, that's not the case at all. So there's so many fun things you can play with, like taking the more or less on some of your favorite Nuggets or Avs players. Take the game coming up next for Denver and Minnesota. I'm taking the more on Nikola Jokic's points, rebounds, and assists combined at 50.5. Also going to go less on Karl Anthony Towns as the Timberwolves have cooled off. And then I like the more on Obi Toppin, 8.5 points in another revenge game against his former team, the New York Knicks. So if you like my selections, download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. I've put all that information in the comments and description of today's video, but give Prize Picks a try today. Download the app and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. So I want to share with you guys the confirmed schedule leaks, and we can kind of piece together who's where Week 1. So we know the Ravens and Chiefs open up the season on Thursday Night Football from Arrowhead. Next up in chronological order, Packers and Eagles are throwing down in Brazil. All right. Then in Week 1 on Monday Night Football, we've got Jets at 49ers. Aaron Rodgers once again on Monday Night Football in Week 1. Hopefully this time it goes better for him. Cowboys at Browns in Tom Brady's broadcasting debut. That will be Fox's America's Game of the Week, 4:25 p.m. Eastern. And then in Week 2, and I'm sharing the Week 2 ones because they're relevant, Bills at Dolphins on Thursday night. Bengals at Chiefs for another 4:25 America's or primetime matchup. And I think that because the Bills, Dolphins, Bengals, and Chiefs are all in primetime or at least a marquee game in Week 2, it's unlikely that they are in back-to-back primetime matchups. So, could we see the Broncos be a primetime matchup week 1 against Russell Wilson and the Pittsburgh Steelers? The Pittsburgh Pirates, they are home week 1, Sunday week 1 at 1:35 p.m. Eastern. Now, the Pirates and the Steelers somewhat share parking lots. Like, it's not an absolute one parking lot for both teams, but I don't think both teams would play at home at the same time, roughly. So, to me, I think that signals the Pittsburgh Steelers will be on the road week 1. So, we may get Russell Wilson's return to Denver in week 1 on Sunday Night Football. Because as we just went through, they've already filled a lot of the other primetime slots. And so when I look over the remaining teams that are not already assigned to a week 1 game, like, you've got some boring ones. Like, no offense, but they're not putting the Jags week 1 Sunday Night Football. No offense, producer Trace. They're probably not putting Derek Carr and the Saints week 1 Sunday Night Football. Okay? But I think when you look at some of the other juicier scheduled matchups for 2024, Broncos Steelers. Kirk Cousins return against the Minnesota Vikings maybe week 1. The New York Giants are celebrating their 100th season. Peter Schrager said maybe Giants Commanders Sunday Night Football week 1. Bears Lions. The NFL loves putting Chicago in prime time, and with Caleb Williams there. And we saw the Lions last year do really well against the Chiefs on Thursday night to open up the year. That could be a possibility. I feel like this has noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern written all over it. So, what do you guys think? Do you want the Broncos to play the Steelers in week 1 of Sunday Night Football? Yes or no? I'll give you my response in a moment, but first, give me your response down below in the comment section. Personally, I would love to see this happen. And I'm coming from an angle of what is the most optimal timing for the Denver Broncos to play Russell Wilson? Advantage Denver. Not advantage TV ratings and just drama and get your popcorn moments. But if you're thinking about when would be the best time for the Broncos to play Russell Wilson, I think it's got to be week 1. Because Broncos country saw this play out in front of their own eyes not too many years ago when Russell Wilson went to Seattle in week 1. And how did that end? Not very well for Russell Wilson's return. So, yeah, I think if you put it in the beginning of the season, Russell Wilson's not going to be as comfortable with his new team. Put it a little bit later in the year, he'll have picked up a lot of the Mike Tomlin and offensive schematics installed in Pittsburgh. Whereas if it's in week 1, I think Russell Wilson may let the moment and the emotions kind of bubble over him too much. Whereas if it's a week 7 game, guy would have played 6 games by then. He'll be a lot more settled in. He'll have a lot better of a connection with his wide receivers. If you're talking what is best for the Denver Broncos, I think it's facing Russell Wilson immediately because just like in Seattle, it felt like the emotions got the better of him at times. Plus, Hackett was an absolute, I want to say another word, but I'll get canceled. We'll say idiot. All right. That will do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us here on the Broncos Breakdown. If you're not subscribed yet, please go ahead and do so. We're less than 100 subscribers away from reaching 22,000. So if you're already subscribed, scroll on down, type me so I can know A, who watches all the way to the end of the video, and B, where the sub gang is at.